coverage of the first by-election of the new Parliament. Results, opinions and analysis in a midnight hour special with David Dimbleby.
Good evening and welcome to the Sports Centre of Brunel University in Uxbridge, where the heart of British politics beats tonight. This is the scene of the count in today's by-election, the first of this Parliament. The ballot boxes arrived here around about 10 o'clock. They began counting at about 11:15, and we're expecting the result round about somewhere between 1:30 and 2. And if Labour win, as they hope tonight, they will see this as a kind of cherry on the top of the cake of their massive victory only 90 days ago on the 1st of May. For the Tories, on the other hand, if William Hague, their new leader, is able to pull this first plum out of the pie, it'll be a sort of encouragement for them that all is not lost after the ghastly humiliation that they suffered. Now, back in May, the Conservatives did hold Uxbridge. It was won by Sir Michael Shersby, though he saw his majority cut from 13,000 in 1992 to just over 724. He won 18,095 votes against 17,371 for Labour's candidate, David Williams, subsequently dropped by Labour in favour of a new candidate today, and 4,528 for the Liberal Democrats and others, including, incidentally, the Referendum Party, who aren't standing here tonight. They got 1,551. Now, it was Sir Michael Shersby's death just a week after polling day that led to this by-election at the end of July, just as Parliament comes to an end, called, it's thought, in rather a hurry by the Conservatives. During this by-election, Carolyn Quinn has been following the campaign, and we'll hear her report on the by-election. It's the course of it later on. But she's standing down there at the count in the sports hall. And can you give us an idea, Carolyn, first of all, what the turnout's been? Do you know yet?
Yeah, we've just been told it's about 55.47%. I think that's about
it can't
as
be
precise
about 55.47, exactly 55.47.
Exactly 55.47%. Some of the candidates are starting to make their way through. I can see Keith Kerr standing over there for the Liberal Democrats, and Lord Such has been standing very near me. His doctor actually been offering a bit of advice on how the counting should take place. But as you say, we're expecting a result in about an hour's time. The returning officer, David Bruff, is collecting all the boxes together at the top table, which is behind me here.
What do you read into a turnout of 55%? Does that tend to favour the Conservatives or tend to favour Labour, in your view?
Well, traditionally, a turnout like that would favour the Conservatives, and certainly there does seem to be a tangible mood of optimism in the Tory camp. Tory workers that I've been talking to over the past 2 weeks, who perhaps have seemed quite depressed at times, do seem quite upbeat at the moment, and by contrast, the Labour workers around me here are being quite low beat. So I think we could be seeing some sort of Conservative victory here. We don't know what sort of figures, but maybe a couple of hundred. It's going to be very close, whatever the result.
OK, Karen, thanks very much. We'll be back with you later on. A Conservative was saying to me just a moment ago, are you going to breathe life into this campaign, which has been so dull all the way through? But certainly the scene tonight down there does seem fairly lively. There are some people down there in the traditional sort of fancy dress. I don't know if you can see them. Top hats, somebody dressed as a surgeon, coloured top hats, and the serious work being done beyond. Careful checking of the ballot boxes, careful counting, and a 10-minute check, we're told, by a cautious returning officer when all that is over. I should just add one thing. If you want to watch this on the internet, on World Wide Web, this is our address, and it's on the screen there. If you note that down, you can watch it that way. And in the meantime, that's the gallery view, and here is the Midnight Hour studio, where we're going to be talking with our guests, Simon Hughes for the Liberal Democrats, John Prescott, Deputy Prime Minister; for Labour, Sir Norman Fowler, Shadow Secretary of the Environment; and the BBC's own Bill Bush, who's the head of our political research unit. And we'll be talking about some of the issues that have arisen in the campaign locally and the general standing of the Labour Party 90 days into this government in a moment. But it's just worth pointing out, if Labour wins tonight, it'll be only the 4th time since 1945, since the Second World War, that a government in power, in office, has managed to take a seat off the opposition, so it would be a rare event. If the Tories win, it'll be their first by-election victory since their own new leader, William Hague, came into the House of Commons by winning Richmond in Yorkshire in 1989. And so the question is what Uxbridge will bring us tonight. It's always said to be natural Tory territory, but as Carolyn Quinn discovered during the campaign, Labour doesn't really concede that there's any such thing as natural Tory territory anymore.
For commuters travelling west out of London, Uxbridge merely represents the end of the Underground Line. But as the scene of Labour's first by-election test, Uxbridge suddenly finds itself at the centre of the political map. Years ago, there were miles of countryside between here and the centre of London. But the construction of the railway led to the creation of suburbs, immortalised as Metroland by Sir John Betjeman. Uxbridge today, like a reflection of so many suburban areas, mixes 30s homes with more modern developments, not always successfully. The ubiquitous office block stands proud, but it was a market town, and there are traces of the character it once had. A safe Tory seat since the 1970s, Uxbridge is unremarkable. Reasonably prosperous, largely middle class, but with one of the country's highest employment levels. Only 20 miles west out of London, it feels much more remote. But that, apparently, is how Uxonians, like the astrologer Russell Grant, who was born and bred here, prefer it.
People here in Uxbridge feel very much a part of Middlesex, as an important market town of Middlesex, an important centre of Middlesex, and they don't feel a part of London. That's about 20 miles up the road to them.
Doing his best to woo Middlesex for Labour has been 36-year-old barrister Andrew Slaughter, a foreigner by Uxbridge standards, coming all the way from Hammersmith and Fulham. But by lucky coincidence, he says he's an avid Middlesex cricket fan.
John Randall, he's your candidate.
The Conservatives say their man, 42-year-old John Randall, is the only truly local candidate. For generations, his family have run the department store in Uxbridge. He's been likened to a Dickensian mill owner.
One for the Tories and one for the Labour Party.
For the Lib Dems, 42-year-old Keith Kerr fought Vauxhall in May. He's a British Airways manager at nearby Heathrow. Tricky that when his party opposes the building of Terminal 5. By-elections may come and go, but Uxbridge will always have a special place in the nation's history. It was from this secret operations room, 60 foot below ground at RAF Uxbridge, that Churchill's fighter command masterminded the Battle of Britain. In the eventual triumph of the RAF over the Luftwaffe, strategy, determination and luck all played their part. It was a turning point in the war, and in the euphoria that followed the final defeat of Hitler 5 years later, Labour was swept to power with their first landslide victory this century. After another landslide in May this year, Labour appeared invincible. Surely they'd walk this by-election. But behind the rapturous welcome for Tony Blair as he broke convention to campaign here, there was anger at the way the party had imposed an archetypal new Labour candidate. After Tony came the real star, Grant, straight from the EastEnders set, to add celebrity oomph to the campaign.
Does it need boosting? It doesn't help. It doesn't harm anything, does it?
I mean, all campaigns need help, and I'm here to give my help, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
No soap stars for the Conservatives, but they did have...
Jeffrey Archer.
Behind you.
You're parking up somewhere.
I've come to support John Randall.
It's a bit wet out there, isn't it?
Randall, the local man.
Michael Portillo's my name. How do you do? This is John Randall, the candidate in the by-election. Right. Randall, that's a name you'll know in Uxbridge, isn't it?
We do. Definitely, we do.
Have you brought your furniture there?
We're just taking our grandmother round it in the past. That's about it.
It's just a basic old-fashioned campaign. We go out, we meet people on the street, we meet them in their houses. I know modern things are sometimes in vogue, and there's certainly no room for complacency, but I don't think people are always fooled by some of these rather flash things.
On May the 1st, Britain elected new Labour with a pledge to...
Whether the Labour campaign video is flash or not's a matter of opinion, but it's been sent to 5,000 floating voters as part of a blitz on the constituency.
By-elections often have a low turnout because people think it won't change anything. Well, that's wrong, because it will change a great deal if people in Uxbridge elect a new Labour MP.
The amazing Kerr family risking life and limb for the sake of the Liberal Democrats. But really, Dad Keith has no hopes in this race, apart from practising for a more winnable seat.
One of the techniques we've been trialling, a target that I've set myself, is to meet at least 500 of the electorate each day and to have a conversation for at least 15 to 20 seconds with them so that you can build that rapport.
All along, it's been said that this will be a close result. But whoever gets sent to Westminster from Uxbridge depends on whether this former Tory heartland goes back to its roots, or whether 3 months of a Labour government have convinced people here that now's the time to hitch up to the Blair bandwagon.
That was Carolyn Quinn's report on the Uxbridge by-election. The count is going on behind us here. We'll be keeping an eye on it, and as soon as, of course, as the returning officer starts clearing his throat and goes to the microphone, we'll bring you the result. But let's talk, first of all, about the course of the by-election itself, the first of this Parliament. John Prescott, first of all, do you think, with hindsight, it was a mistake to dump David Williams, who'd done rather well at the general election only 90 days ago?
Well, we have a procedure in a very successful by-election history, I'm bound to say, of selecting candidates by a different procedure than we do for general elections. You remember we had the controversy in the Whittle where we replaced a candidate there as well, because we expect a greater standard from those who are involved in a by-election, and we leave that committee to establish it, and hence we had a change in candidate.
So you don't regret it, and you don't think it did any damage to Labour's standing?
Well, it's certainly an issue on the doorstep. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and it was certainly exploited by the Tories quite effectively, but we have our procedures, and that's how we elect them, and that's the way we are. If you find tonight they've been damaging to you, would you revise the way you go about this and give more autonomy to local parties in by-elections? Well, I can remember you've had discussions here. There's a good example, Simon's here. That was a Labour seat many years ago, and the constituency selected a candidate there. It certainly was disastrous for us ever since we've adopted the new procedures, because we think by-elections are different. There's a lot more attention, a lot more pressure on the candidates, and we've won them all. What about Tony Blair coming down here? Because that apparently is a precedent that's been broken as Prime Minister to come to a by-election. Does that mean that you are desperate to hold this seat tonight, that it really matters very much that you can show the shows on the road? Tony Blair, like myself, has always been in these by-elections. He's a leader as well as a Prime Minister, and I certainly have the view that the leader goes in and fights the fight with the people on the ground, and I think that's true. And whilst people might say, do you go in when it's a win or a loss, then you begin to indicate that perhaps you're making a decision before the electorate. I just think leaders get involved, whether they're Prime Ministers or not, in fighting their party's case and putting it forward, and I think Tony Blair's the kind of guy who always leads from the front, and he's done it here, in a seat which is really a Tory seat. I heard you saying that Labour hopes to win, but the odds got to be against us in the seat that basically was, what, 12.5% swing. It's really a landslide, and we still didn't make it 700 majority. But we'll wait and see what the electorate have got to say. We've fought a good campaign, and we'll wait to see the result. So you don't think it'll be too damaging for Labour's self-esteem if you've lost tonight? Well, you mean that we didn't get another Tory seat? I mean, we've got a hell of a majority, I'm bound to say to you. And 12.5% swing was a phenomenal, twice the kind of proportional swing to any political party. It was a landslide. It's a Tory seat. They may well be able to hold it. It seems to be tight from what you're saying, but it is a Tory seat. It would be nice to have gone off on holiday having taken one more, Oh, I'd like to take another. I always like taking seats off Tories. I mean, it's great. But I've got to be a bit realistic about this one. Norman Fowler, why are the Tories going to adopt, so it seems, exactly the same policy towards by-elections that Labour does? You're going to centralise, or so we're told, the candidates. William Hague's going to want to have more control over them, no local autonomy.
and instead of the owner of the local store being your candidate, we'll have somebody from central office imposed?
No, we won't do that. That's exactly what we won't do. I mean, whatever we do in terms of the organisation and sharpening up the centre of the organisation, getting rid of the division between the National Union and all the other parts of the party, and that requires a lot of organisation. I think William Hague is absolutely right to get a grip of that. What we are going to continue to do is to leave autonomy with the associations and allow the associations to choose the candidate. And John Randall is a kind of case in point. I mean, John Randall's had an extremely good campaign. I think that I hear John Prescott massaging down expectations about this by-election, but
still a Labour seat.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think that by common consent, I think John Randall has had the better of the campaign. A good local candidate, fought the local issues, knew the constituency, and Labour parachuted someone in from outside.
So you're sticking with the policy that gave you Neil Hamilton as your candidate in Tatton?
We're sticking with a policy which allows the associations to choose their own candidate. We're certainly sticking with that. And I mean, we're all here because, I mean, in the past, central office have tried to have influence here or have influence there, and associations have taken their own view, and for one reason or another, quite a lot of us have benefited from that. So it goes both ways. But it certainly may be the case in the future that in exceptional circumstances, really exceptional circumstances, then the centre can intervene. No, I was going to say it can intervene on, for example, a candidate who lets, if you like, lets the party down. I'm not actually talking. I'm not talking about personalities there.
What do you mean you're not talking about personalities? You're not talking about Neil Hamilton?
I'm not talking about Neil Hamilton.
So what are you talking about?
I'm talking about a certain, what we're looking at, what we're examining. We're only examining it at the moment. What we're examining is to see if there, in some circumstances, the centre can go in and require a
But you see what John Prescott
But that's not the same. Yeah, but that's not the same as what John Prescott is doing, because what John Prescott is doing is inserting their judgment on who should be the candidate in the by-election.
And
we're not doing that.
He says he does this, whether they've won or not tonight. They do it because by-elections need a special kind of candidate because they have such a focus of attention.
Well, I think that the best judge of that is actually the association. The best judge of that are the local people. I think we've actually established that. Irrespective of what happens in this by-election, irrespective of what the result is, I think that John Randall has established himself as the best candidate. He's fought the best campaign, he's fought the most knowledgeable campaign, and the association have been absolutely right in choosing that candidate. We're not going to interfere with that. That would be ridiculous.
So Peter Thatcher, I mean,
Peter Thatcher was on your mind tonight.
Well, because it was actually a case where it was picked by the constituent, and Simon won that election there. We haven't been able to take it back again, and that happened in one or two constituencies, because the candidate was not good enough. It was collected by the constituency party in that case, and Hamilton was selected by the association, re-endorsed by the association.
Yeah, but
and I thought Mr. Hague had said he was reserving his right to be able to intervene in these matters. Okay. Fine, he does that. We have a proper selection committee which they all can go before.
Simon Hughes, it's said your candidate is the best of the three by observers, though as doesn't have a hope in hell of winning tonight.
He's certainly, I mean, I know the bloke very well. He fought Vauxhall, as your report said, at the general election. He's a very good candidate. I mean, because it's interesting, the procedure we have is a sort of compromise between the two for a by-election. But for valid reasons. John made a perfectly valid point. By-elections have huge attention given to them. What we now do effectively is the party has a regional, local and national committee combined. They shortlist and then hand the shortlist over to the local party, who then choose. But it doesn't give the local party total discretion, because there may be, for very good reasons.
But Labour give a shortlist, don't they? They give a shortlist, but then you
still the constituency. No, in this case too, but sometimes be 4 or 5 people, and they will actually select them. They will elect them themselves. We just shortlist. That's all. We don't do the individual. Though in the Whittle case, we did choose the one because it was a very quick election, was expected by the government. We had to move rather quickly.
There was also just, John will remember, in the general election, there were a few selections that Labour left after the election was called, which got sorted.
One or two peerages are coming up.
Well, that's an issue for tomorrow.
Yes, well,
but you're faced with situations where members of Parliament resign.
John says with a straight face.
I'm old enough to have been at the by-election when a Labour Member of Parliament was forced to resign in Leighton to make way for Patrick Gordon Walker.
Who didn't get elected.
And he was defeated, because the Labour constituents were so angry at the Labour MP being unseated and given a peerage which he didn't want.
Or the David Martin case, where he wanted to go off to Europe, and the electorate didn't like the idea that he wanted to go off on his own personal reasons, having fought the election, and they defeated the Labour.
Hold on, let's just come back to
deal with the point here. The reality is, this is a seat where it ended up being, it had been a very Tory seat. It ended up being very close results. So clearly a third party, as the whole of the last Parliament show goes in, at the Hughes disadvantage, because we have to try and elbow our way in.
Just one thing, if you're trying to elbow your way in, this is a constituency that is ethnically, or racially if you like, 90% white and about 10% Asian. You chose a black candidate, a Caribbean black candidate to go in. Was that deliberate?
No, Keith was one of the candidates who was on the London list. He works just down the road. He knows the area well. His family he lives with his family just down the road, so he was an obvious potential choice. And I hope that the party actually tries to make sure we have a more representative House of Commons by having more women and more black and Asian candidates. But I know for a fact that irrespective of that, he's an extremely good candidate. Okay. And also, he comes with the skills of this area. He's a manager at British Airways. So we're very pleased. I was out with him on Monday. He did a very good job.
One other thing. We'll talk about lib-lab arrangements later on while we wait for the result to come in. But do you expect that some of your voters, because of the cozying up that the Liberal Democrats and Labour have demonstrated in the first 90 days, may have slipped away to Labour tonight?
No. I mean, I picked up none of that when I was here in the campaign. If people left us, it will be because they will have worked out fairly easily and simply that when there was only a majority of 700 at the general election, the battle is between the Tories trying to hold on, Labour trying to win it. And people vote tactically. They did so in the whole of the last Parliament. And the third place party, I think, in every single case, was fighting to prevent itself being squeezed. The test for us is, do we manage to prevent a squeeze? Do we hold our deposit? I gather we will. I hope we will. But let's wait and see.
Bill Bush, now just looking at the significance of this by-election, first in this Parliament, is it of any importance at all in reality in the great political scene? Of course it doesn't affect Labour's ability to govern, but is it psychologically important to Labour to win, to the Tories not to lose?
It's probably a little bit more important to the Conservatives than it is to the Labour Party. The Labour Party is basking still in the glory of biggest landslide it's ever had. But for the Tories, they've got a new leader. They're trying to make a fresh start. It's William Hague's slogan in his election campaign. He's continued it through in his early days as leader. And it's hard to make a fresh start if you carry on losing elections. So I think they will be quite keen to hold it. Labour will brush it off as being, we couldn't even win it on May the 1st. Why should we win it now? The reason why they should win it now is because they're meant to be enjoying an unprecedented honeymoon, and the opinion polls, including one today, suggest that they've improved their position since May the 1st. So they've had some explaining to do, but I think we're looking at the Tories desperately keen, really, to head off for their summer break with something just a touch reassuring behind them.
But I mean, nothing that happens tonight could amount to a full endorsement of William Hague's leadership, because he's only been going for a few weeks.
That's right, it's much too soon. This is going to be one of those by-elections that in not many years' time, people will look back and scratch their heads and try and remember when it was. It's not going to be like Simon's, where Bermondsey echoes down through the generations, as it were. Uxbridge, I don't think, is going to have the same resonance.
Dave, can I just add one point? Yes. The interesting thing, just from an observer, and I don't make a party point out of this, is that the Tories clearly fought a very local campaign based on the local candidate. I think it's fair to say William Hague hardly featured in the literature, and he came once on a fairly low-profile visit. For obvious reasons, and John owned up about the point, Labour fought a much more nationally based campaign, and the candidate clearly was not given such prominence because he'd been parachuted in. So people fight different campaigns, and you know, you have to judge the tactic. And if I was the Tories, I would have certainly played the card, having chosen the local department store boss as your candidate, who's lived here for generations. That's the card you play. If you end up with a candidate who has never been here in his life or been here twice or something, I mean, I haven't a clue, but certainly doesn't come from here, then you play the National Party.
He's a barrister who says he's often appeared in court here.
Well, so have I, so by early days.
I had to smile a bit when I saw some of the Tory literature, because it's exactly what we did in the Whittle. I mean, we point out exactly what the local points are, and you take them off. I mean, there are different messages to give about different candidates. That's the nature of elections.
Just one thing before we move on and look at the state of politics generally. What did Tony Blair mean when he said, it was quoted in that film, that your candidate was thoroughly New Labour?
I don't know, you better ask David.
You don't know.
Well, I mean, he was a man very much in tune exactly with the kind of New Labour position that Tony's been able to get across on behalf of the Labour Party. It was very successful at the election. It's one that's a party that's very much in change, but which you pointed out often enough in these programmes. And I think when they talk about the old Labour and the new Labour, and I tend to be dumped a bit into the old Labour, there are these two characteristics that people identify, and he was saying Andy Slaughter was very much the kind of New Labour candidate with that kind of background, that kind of thinking, which the electorate have clearly turned to.
Right, so he was more...
In a sense, I think that has been the mistake of the Labour campaign, because I think Simon is right. I mean, I think that we have played it with a local candidate and raising local issues, but with a national stage as well, like in some of the environmental issues, for example. I think that quite a lot of people in Uxbridge feel that a sort of someone from outside, a national candidate from outside, has simply been dumped upon them.
But they mobbed Tony Blair when he came here.
That's a different issue.
I mean,
but
I don't know who mobbed Tony Blair, but there were people mobbing.
I noticed when you say a national candidate for outside, I mean, the guy operates his own political life within 20, 30 miles of here. Well, and I believe they do feel here, when I was going around in the constituency, that this isn't part of London, or it's a bit apart. I mean, that's the nature of how constituencies feel about themselves. So when they say it's not local, it's like going to Holland saying, we don't like them in Grimsby, you know, they're another part of the world. So when Austin Mitchell fought that election in Grimsby, there was almost, don't come over for Hull and canvass for Austin Mitchell.
I think there were a number of special audiences provided. I mean, Tony Blair's was one. I noticed that picture in the Evening Standard tonight of John Prescott, I think, this morning, which seemed to consist mainly of children who had been hoisted in to actually take part in, I think, what was described as a rally.
That's something I did very much in the elections. You go around the estates, because you get low turnout on the estates. Turnout's quite critical in these elections, and I think we'll see it here perhaps today. You've got very high turnouts in some of the Conservative wards. They've organised and got their vote out. And we've got to get more of our people out. The trouble is, many of them tend to say to themselves, well, do you know they want another one on your majority? What is 179? Do you want to be 180? And you've got to get turnout. And children, estates, going out and, you know, just being among them is important in getting turnout. Make no mistake about it.
Bill Bush, this argument between whether you run a national campaign with the national slogans, the national characters, or whether you stick with the owner of the local department store, any evidence which is more successful, or is it a question of horses for courses, by-election by by-election?
It's really horses for courses. All the parties have suffered from having really weak candidates. Sometimes they've been truly local people who've been exposed on the national spotlight. Sometimes they've been weak candidates parachuted in from outside. Generally speaking, by-election campaigns will expose candidates' weaknesses. What's very interesting in this campaign is neither of the two main parties have had press conferences. It's been really hard for either candidate. They've shown their faces, but we've not heard much of their voices. We don't really know where they stand on the policies, and I think that's an indication of how professional the parties are now to try and stop.
Yeah, but why have you given up having press conferences?
Well, I was thinking, I certainly had a press conference.
No, your candidate would have normally, in by-elections in the past, your candidate would have appeared every single morning, five days a week.
What we were doing...
For cross-examination.
Yes,
no, but why have you stopped doing
What we were doing, we were having issue press conferences. For example, when I went down, we had a press conference on John Prescott's road planning, and also on his plans on the green belt. Of course the candidate was there, and the candidate was asked questions as well as myself.
But the candidate what
you're saying is that what you rather regret going are those press conferences that Vincent Hanna used to do with such enormous skill, where the press kind of go from one to another, persecuting whoever the kind of by-election candidates are.
Testing is the word.
I mean, that's what.
Well, you've given it up.
I mean, this has happened to a great extent.
Pity, isn't it, really?
Well, I don't know. You just want the bear baiting, don't you? I mean, basically,
you
can't
want to know whether the bloke knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, but it's not got to that stage. You got professionally, everybody's been able to try and tighten down their policies. You can't find a niche in them. They've found the soundbite. They don't answer your questions. The candidate becomes the one you really concentrate on. So all they want to know is the only weak link, they think, is the candidate. So every kind of question is thrown at them. Sometimes it's round a rig, sometimes it's not. And you say to yourself, why subject yourself completely to that?
Do you agree with this? Keep the candidate hidden?
No, we don't.
We don't believe in candidate hidden. I mean, they go around.
No, they're on display, but I mean in a controlled.
They don't do it your way.
Situation.
We decide to pick it our way. Why should we actually play your game?
I think that's a disadvantage. I'll tell you why. Because by-elections, Bill made the valid point, all by-elections are different. But say you've got a government majority, as we have 170, The only reason, to be honest, for voting is because the person X is a better MP than person Y would be, because it's not going to change the course of government history. In the last Parliament, when we were down to a majority of 0, it matters crucially, and it was a national issue. So it matters to the electorate greatly, say in Uxbridge, who they have represented, who will be, for the next 4.5 years, the best MP for Uxbridge. And the reality will be the party allegiance almost doesn't matter. It's who will fight for here, because they can't influence the party.
And we do more public meetings now. We do less press conferences, but more public meetings. So if it's about meeting the electorate, it's a different thing from meeting the press. All the national guys come down and say, can we get that slip, one word? And everybody says, why? You know, and then, well, I mean, the ones I do, and I was doing one the other night, they're open if people want to come to them, and the candidate as well, and subject themselves to questioning. But we don't play the game with the press too much.
But it's not a game the press play, or a game that
game. They turn up. Of course it's a game. You turn up at those press conferences. They're not really interested in reporting what the candidate thinks about it. Have we got a slip? Have we got one line, which is a different? That's your game.
You're fit, really.
No, we don't play your game. What's the matter with that? That's professional. Why should we play your game?
Because for the sake of the voter, they have a chance that way to...
You're speaking for the voter,
Yes.
Well, I'm not so sure you do. All your journalists. Listen, when a journalist come on, they're looking for that one slip.
All right, let's join. I think we can join Carolyn Quinn, who's down on the floor. Carolyn. Carolyn, what's happening down there?
Well, David, yes, down here on the floor, things are hotting up a bit, literally, I have to say. Lots of people down here. Andrew Slaughter, the Labour candidate's just over there. I don't know if you can see him, but he's carrying a baby, quite a handy prop for an election like this. But I'm joined for a feeling about what's been going on by Anthony London. He's the editor of the Uxbridge Gazette, which has been across this story from the very start. Anthony, your feelings now, are you going to say too close to call? You must have some more information than that.
I've been saying too close to call all week, actually, Carolyn, but the main thing is that the local issues have dominated this throughout, and it's beginning to look now, there's just a shift, there's a few rumours running around the room that the Conservatives may be a little bit ahead. Obviously, there's a lot of this goes on at this stage, so we'll carry on hedging our bets for a little bit longer, but I think it's edging towards the Tories.
So what sort of local issues, and have they mattered a great deal?
They have. There's been several environmental threats, M25 expansion, Terminal 5 at Heathrow, a theme park at Uxbridge, which Sir Michael Shersby was heavily involved in. And there's been a hell of a lot of interest in that, and I think that's made people think twice about the way they're going to vote. And that actually goes against the national view that they may have.
And Green Belt, I think everybody's been saying we're environmentally sound, we want to protect Green Belt.
Yes, in fact, there is a degree of unpopularity in the local council because of a very controversial social housing policy. And this has also affected the way a lot of sort of hardline or, moderate, good quality Labour voters have actually viewed things. They're now beginning to think, well, we're not entirely happy, we'll have to see very carefully which way you want to vote.
What about the fact that there was this row over the Labour selection? Do you think that that really has stymied Andrew Slaughter's chances?
I don't think it helped. The fact that, David Williams did actually get 8 of the 16 nominations. And I think it's being perceived at a senior level that this was perhaps a mistake.
And do you think that that will show perhaps with spoiled ballot papers or something like that?
It could do. I think it showed certainly in the canvassing. There weren't many of the local people out doorstepping. There was a lot of bussing in. And that's a very telling sign, I think.
Do you think that because this is a by-election that people will vote for a local candidate? It's not really a knocking the government exercise.
It's unusual, this one. I think because of this local background that's still fresh in people's minds, the sort of government bashing happened immediately after the election. I think people got a little bit fed up with the pressure involved in that, but this is certainly a much more local affair that's quite unusual. It's true democracy, if you like.
Well, you and I were talking about 2 weeks ago, first of all, before the Blair visit came, and the Tories at that point were quite upbeat. What do you think the effect of Tony Blair's visit last Friday had?
I think it was a good sort of rousing exercise, and in fact the atmosphere in Uxbridge High Street was indeed electric. I mean, the town's never seen anything like it. I mean, nothing's really happened in Uxbridge since 1643, when there was an inconsequential treaty negotiation in the Civil War. I mean, it's not used to this level of interest, and I think it was a very, very high impact visit by the Prime Minister. I think obviously he's taken a risk there because he's attached his name to this, and who knows how it's going to go. I mean, it's beginning to look as though he may have to take this on the chin.
And what about the Liberal Democrats? We don't want to forget them because everybody says they've got an outstanding candidate, but he doesn't stand a hope. Is that your view?
It's a harsh view, isn't it? I mean, Keith Kerr has really come out of this very, very well. I mean, even people who obviously don't agree with his views have been struck by his personality. He's done very well. I think he's definitely somebody to watch. I mean, Paddy Ashdown was going around with him the other day, and I think he's very pleased with his performance. So we ought to look out for Keith Kerr in the future.
Trouble is, he's got this difficult position on Terminal 5, hasn't he? He works for British Airways, and they rather fancy Terminal 5, but Liberal Democrats don't like Terminal 5.
It's a tricky one, but of course you'll notice the involvement of Des Wilson in the background of that as well, which is an interesting situation. I think really it's quite a relief for him that he won't have to tackle that problem head on, but I think we'll see him cropping up in somewhere that's nowhere to do with Terminal 5 in due course. But yeah, that could have been a tricky one for him. There's a lot of opinion there, and a lot of people are quite careful about giving that opinion.
OK, well, Anthony London, thank you very much. Along with me, he'll be down on the floor waiting for this result. Could be a bit later than expected, but we will obviously keep you posted. Back to you, David.
Don't know whether we can do any more posting than that. We did say 20-2. I don't have any more information, maybe perhaps 1:45 or so, but as soon as we do here, we'll let you know. Here we are anyway in Uxbridge for the midnight hour. We've been talking about the local election that was held here, the campaign that was fought here, and the choice of candidates. Let's move on now to talk about the standing of the Labour Party 90 days after they came into office. This, first of all, is a brief reminder of what they've achieved in those 90 days and how we've perceived it. Some of the key events of Labour's first 90 days in office, and this has been the effect on public opinion. On May the 1st, at the election, Labour won just over 40% of the popular vote. A recent opinion poll showed that since then the red rose has been proliferating all over Britain, and given the chance to vote all over again, 57% now say that they'd back Labour, while 70% say that they approve of the way Mr. Blair is doing his job as Prime Minister. If you look at the Tories, on the other hand, at the general election, they won just over 31% of the vote. But the latest Mori opinion poll shows support for the Tories now down to 23%. And asked how they thought William Hague is doing in his new job as Leader of the Opposition, 21% said they were satisfied, which is up 12% from 12% last month, shortly after he was elected. So it's been good news on that popularity front for Labour and bad news for the Tories. Norman Fowler, you can't really fault Labour's performance in these first 90 days, can you? It's been an astonishing success story.
Well, I can fault it, but I can't dispute the fact. I can't dispute the fact that they've had a honeymoon period. That's for sure. And of course, what you've just showed about the opinion polls and the Labour position, as far as the opinion polls is concerned, shows the kind of mountain that we have to climb here at this by-election.
But where would you fault it? Where have they gone wrong? I think, where have they done things that you wouldn't have done had you been there?
One very specific thing is the pension tax, which was introduced in the budget. I mean, that was looked at by Ken Clarke specifically and rejected. That is yes.
He did it.
No, he didn't. Norman Lamont took it down from 25 to 20, and you abolished it, the 20%. You abolished the 20%. Ken Clarke looked at it and specifically rejected it. That's the position. And that is a saving of £5 billion, not just this year, next year, but for evermore.
Stop them having to put up income tax.
Well, yes, but I mean, what does it do?
Well, yes, it stops them putting up income tax.
Well, they're pledged on income tax, but what it does do is for people with personal pensions, 6 million people, people in local authority pension schemes, people in pension schemes generally are suffering as a result of that.
But in general, you give them a clean bill of health.
I don't. Well, that,
I mean, are you surprised that they haven't stumbled more grievously?
I most certainly don't give them. No, I think that is one point. I think what concerns me, and I think concerns others as well, and not just on party grounds, is the way that Parliament, I was going to say, is being bypassed. That is putting probably too high. But the way the arrogance of Labour as far as Westminster is concerned, statements in the House and the rest not being made, guillotines being imposed. I think there are a whole range of things that we will that will come home to roost as far as all this is concerned. And there are a whole range of policies that I don't agree with, not least some of the policies that John Prescott is carrying.
But any more arrogant than the Tories were when they were in office?
Well, what I do, and John is not going to agree with this, but what I do remember in my period in office, when I was in office for 10 years, when, for example, I launched a pension review back in the mid-80s, it was a statement on the floor of the House. This time, billed as the most fundamental pension review the world has ever known, and it was done in a written answer.
But why does that matter to the voter?
Because, well, why it should matter to the voter is this, for the reason that we were talking about previously. If you have a statement on the floor of the House, then people are able to ask questions of that statement. If you do it all the time by written answer, a report on the Today programme, then taking the agenda through the day, that is not debate. That is public relations.
Simon Hughes, do you think they're arrogant?
There are signs of centralised control. I mean, let me deal with the general point. I mean, I think they've done well, generally, for the last 3 years. I mean, there are specific things I can clearly deal with. But they've tried to start honouring manifesto commitments. We still have the same dispute with them about public expenditure. They inherited the Tories' public expenditure plans. They've kept to it. We're very clear that the health service, for example, won't have enough money, local government and so on. Pre-election issues, divides, continued after the election. The budget, we think, took some of the wrong steps, one of which, I agree with Norman Fowler, was to deal with pension funds. There are worrying signs. The announcement about Prime Minister's questions time moving should have gone to the House of Commons first, because all members have an interest, not a government matter at all. Some of the other changes announced, I mean, I have to say, one affected us, featured on your film, which was the Cabinet Committee. I mean, I happen to think it's a good idea, but it was pretty executive as an introduction. And I think there is a danger. I think Tony Blair's danger is that he will seek, as he did in the by-election in a way, to impose centralised views. And clearly, a lot of the Labour Party don't like that. Labour Party is a broad church, as all parties are. And I just believe that if they were going to hold the thing together, they're going to need to be more inclusive and accept, for example, that you should be allowed to dissent in the Labour Party. The very interesting thing is that for the first 2 months, hardly anybody stood in Prime Minister's questions from the Labour backbenches. And it looked very much to me as if Mandelson or somebody had organised that one Labour person stood per question. I say that simply in contrast to the previous Parliament, when there were loads of people standing all the time to try to get in from both sides of the House. Right, it's much more stage managed.
Let's deal with the stage managing and a broad church which doesn't allow dissent, John Prescott. Is that a fair description?
It's not true. I mean, we've seen dissent in the last week, if you like. I mean, there have been discussions. There will be in the Labour Party. It's the natural part of it. And if you look at Prime Minister's questions, I mean, I've got to say, Simon, it's a new format, but at least people are standing from both sides, and they have in the Labour Party. I don't think there's that kind of stifling of dissent. There's a desire, of course, and one lesson we've learned is not to have the bitter divisions. If there's anything, the reason why the Tories are out of office is the bitter divisions that did split them on Europe and other areas. I think it contributed to their defeat. The Labour Party played a similar role in the 1980s. We have learned that lesson, and the new candidates
have we ever had in British politics as tighter control over a parliamentary party as Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson are seeking to exert? With the new rules for ministers, decisions about who will appear on television programmes like this, decisions about what interviews. Well, we invited Claire Short to be here tonight, and she said she'd come, and we were told she couldn't come, but you were coming. Very glad to have you. But I mean, this was.
I know, but if you want to play those silly games, you know, I've been.
It's not a silly game.
Well,
it's a serious
can I
point.
just assume it's a silly one? You might not think. What I just want to make the point to you, I've done every one of the by-election programmes. I tend to be in charge of by-election strategy, and so I've been involved.
No, I'm very glad to have you here.
I know, but don't make your point. You're trying to make the point that somehow we remove Claire. I've always done the by-elections. I have a responsibility for the by-elections, and I've appeared on every one of the programmes. So you to suggest somehow that that's the evidence that we're now controlling, it's just untrue. I always do the by-election programme. Right. Normally you come to me about it. You didn't on this occasion, apparently.
What about the rule that Tony Blair is trying to introduce, that ministers will not give interviews, will not be allowed to meet the press without it being recorded, that side of things? Now, I'm only saying...
there's a desire to coordinate. There's a desire to coordinate some of the newses, for example. Ministers are involved, particularly in the early stages of government, in making lots of statements. And it's quite natural for the government to want to get the full attention to a particular statement and not having them conflicting. That's quite normal. I mean, we've seen a number of examples where there has been conflict between the different stories, and it's felt, why don't we coordinate it better? Now, clearly Tony Blair wants to achieve that. There's no kind of controlling of it, except to present the government's case in the best way. That seems all right.
And what about the arrogance towards Parliament? I mean, the Speaker herself was rebuking Labour, wasn't she, the other day, for saying that they were in danger of not giving Parliament
well, I listened to what the Speaker said about leaks, for example. I mean, I found it about the roads leaks, for example, that were coming, I must say, basically from inside the department, leaks about different stories of what was going to happen on the roads. And there's the Speaker was saying, why don't you tell Parliament first? I'd be delighted to tell Parliament. I was available to tell Parliament if that was the case. But when you have leaks like that, governments then are faced with a situation. How do they manage their case? Do they simply leave it to all the leaks? I think that happened to the other government. It happens to ourselves. And the Speaker rightfully gets extremely annoyed about it, that they're reading in the paper the news that really should be told to Parliament. And she's right to make that point, and I think she has to understand the difficulties of management news.
In a leak. I mean, a leak is an unauthorized use of information, literally leaking it out. There's a difference between doing that and actually launching things outside, deliberately launching things
on the Today programme,
on the Today programme, going forward through the day, and that has become very much the approach of your government.
Well, let's turn to something else. Let's turn to some serious issue of the economy. Do you think the budget was a good budget, or do you think that the budget has laid problems for the economy that are going to come home to roost by the autumn?
Well, I think my reservations and opposition to the budget was very much the kind of opposition that I've just stated. I was opposed to the measures that were taken, and measures like the £5 billion pension tax, I suppose, is the number one thing that I was opposed to.
Is the economy overheating, and are we going to have some measures, extra measures taken in the autumn to prevent that happening?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't. I certainly think that when we handed it over, it wasn't overheating. It's very difficult for anyone other than the Chancellor to kind of come to that conclusion. But certainly, I think it is beyond debate almost that we handed over a strong economy to the Labour Party. I don't really think anyone is seriously trying to suggest that that was not the case.
But you're not one of those who say that by giving control over inflation to the Bank of England, we're now heading for we're not heading for ever-rising interest rates, when in fact the Chancellor should have put up taxation to curb a boom of consumers.
No, I wouldn't have handed over control of interest rates to the Bank of England for the very good reason that I think that the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Ken Clarke as the last Chancellor of the Exchequer established this very well, I think that he is the man who is best able to take that decision, taking all things into account.
But you're not faulting what has actually happened in terms of interest rates or inflation or the growth in the economy at the moment?
There will be a tendency for interest rates to be higher than they otherwise would have been, because we again remember, if you go back to Ken Clarke's period as Chancellor, you would have known and you would have seen a number of times when the bank was saying one thing, Ken said another, kept his nerve, he was right and the bank was wrong.
John Prescott, are you alarmed at the height to which sterling is going and the cries just today from manufacturing industry that they are ceasing to be able to export in the way they could 6 months ago?
I think anyone looking at the economy has got to be concerned when manufacturing is affected by the exchange rate and strong pound. gives advantages people going on holidays, but I mean for the people who are manufacturing, and the long-term effect can be very difficult, and chancellors have to make judgments about whether economies are overheating and the interest rate effects. Now, Ken Clarke, of course, had his arguments with the Bank of England. We've made a judgment now to give it to the Bank of England to do that, but the rate of growth in the economy at the moment, building on the growth that were in the Tory party, would have led to some charges of overheating in the economy, and the, what, 20-odd billion pounds that's now come into the economy from the conversion of the building societies into banks has had a tremendous effect and will affect inflation. If we made the judgment about inflation as that target as we have, inevitably interest rates in many cases will rise. Now that causes some concern, but how you handle a 20 billion push into the market at the moment is difficult, whether it's a Tory government or a Labour government, and will affect the judgment about the overheating of the economy.
What would the Liberal Democrats have done about that problem?
Well, we've argued for certain different measures. We oppose the windfall tax because we believe a one-off tax is not a good principle for taxation. We did argue that there should be higher tax rates at the beginning. We'd always argued actually that you should hand interest rates over, and Labour, that wasn't in their manifesto, it was in ours, because otherwise you do get chances, sometimes, not always, interfering politically for their own political ends, and that's bad. But the point that we've got to face up to is that the implication of the issues that government has to grapple with, which are the interest rate changes, particularly as it affects our exports and imports, is that actually a single currency deals with that issue. If you have a stable single currency for Europe, then you don't have those variables. And yes, of course, travellers on the summer holidays may benefit at the moment.
But this 20 billion from the windfalls that have come to people in building societies, what would you do about that? Would you increase taxation? I mean, there are those who think that the economy is running out of control, aren't there?
There were two issues, weren't there, that government was going to have to address. One was the huge deficit, which was the negative side of the economy as the Tories left it. You had to start paying off the debt, and to be fair, the Chancellor came up with a proposal to do that. But the other was the growth in the economy, which we could all see coming. And therefore, yes, we would have taken more out by taxation. We think that the Labour Party were wrong to do that. And even if they weren't willing to change basic and higher rate income tax, they could have done it in other ways.
All right. It's just after 20 to 2, and I said at the beginning of the programme that's when the result was going to come through. Let's go to Carolyn Quinn on the floor at the count and find out how far adrift we are. Carolyn, when do you expect the result to come through now?
Well, we're giving indications that it should be about 10 minutes' time. What's happening behind me there? The agents have just been up to the table to talk to the returning officer and to be shown the spoilt ballot papers. Now, we don't know how many there are of those, but we should find out that number later. In the meantime, the candidates are waiting around. I have to say that the Tory team are looking extremely happy. The Labour team are looking slightly glum. Apparently, Andrew Slaughter, the Labour candidate, has said that he's quite happy to return to his old job. So I don't know whether that's an indication that he is resigning himself already to defeat. The Conservative candidate, in the meanwhile, John Randall, he's wandering in a crowd of people over that side. He apparently was watching Carry On movies before he came here to the count. So either a very relaxed man or somebody who's not really worried at all.
Carolyn, thanks very much. Well, 10 minutes or so and we should be back with you. John Prescott.
Get used to Carry On films, they can't do anything else in Parliament.
Carry On politics.
Carry On politics for the Tory party.
John Prescott, there was eyebrows very much raised when Roy Hattersley launched into the attack on Labour in The Guardian this week and said, in my view, the good society is the equal society, and the abandonment of that belief by Labour has made me a reluctant dissenter. It's no longer a force for a more equal society. That not only justifies dissent, it demands dissent. Didn't that make you feel very uneasy about the way Labour's gone?
Yeah, I thought it was a load of rubbish. I mean, Roy comes out with his statements and he puts them in a very attractive way, but at the end of the day, if you say the Labour Party is not about equality, getting more equity in society, I have to say to you, within those, 10, 11 weeks that we've had, or even the budget that found $1 billion more for education, $1 billion more for the health service, that looked about $1 billion that nearly came in for housing, right, to deal with the homeless, getting people back to work. We talked about the windfall tax of $3.5 billion. You know, there's nothing more than inequality when you haven't got a job, or you can't get proper treatment, or you can't get a decent education. They're about equality. They're about people treated more equally. And I would have thought Roy would have been quite supportive, if you like, of one example of where we're reducing the class sizes, paid by ending the assistance scheme.
But you know what he means. He means redistributive taxation, doesn't he? He thinks, he cites other countries with top tax rates of 50, 55%, and says surely to God Britain could have a higher top tax rate and give a bit of it back.
Well, I think we have certainly put our case on taxation, on the revenue business, and we put it in the election, and Roy knows that manifesto. That's the one that we're fighting on, and that's the one that we'll stick to.
But Tony Benn says this is a party that's sliding away from being a Labour party, losing its connection with the unions, becoming a Social Democrat party.
Well, I mean, they're judgments that everybody can make in the debate that's going on, and Tony's been saying that for a long time, but there is change going on in the Labour Party. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You can argue whether you agree with the change, or whether you go into the direction, which direction it's maybe going into, but it's a broad church. I have different views from some others in the Labour Party, and I'll argue for that case, and I'll never give up the belief that the Labour Party isn't about getting more equality in a British society. I think it needs to do that, and after 18 years, we've seen more unequal distribution of these things, whether it's in power or in wealth, and the Labour Party is very much about correcting that.
Do you feel that the Labour Party, Simon Hughes, is still about correcting inequality?
Well, when it comes to the Great Divide, I mean, traditionally, and John's right, the Tory party has widened the gap in Britain, I mean, more than ever before. And the Labour Party and the Liberal Party traditionally are on the side of narrowing the gap and greater equality. So we've come from the same stable in that sense. I'm troubled when it comes to some of the practicalities, because I share the view, the question you asked, and the party took the very clear view that we should have had higher rate income tax, that the higher rate should have been 50%, not 40%. That income tax shouldn't have been cut in the last 2 years, and we should have put a penny back. I'll just give you one example, and I'm concerned. I represent a constituency with some of the richest people in Britain, and many of the poorest now to work, and it is desperately important to people like my constituents that the gap narrows. And the example I give is that by not having a higher rate of income tax at 50 pence in the pound, the man who just before the election had a 17 million bonus in the city last year was paying exactly the same on his 17 million extra as everybody else was earning 6,000 quid. And with that extra tax take, you could have taken about 80 people out of tax altogether. Now, we believe we have to be far more aggressive about correcting inequality. I'm nervous. I understand why the Labour Party did it. They needed to get re-elected. I understand that. But I'm nervous if they keep on only going for the middle-class established voter and not really being radical about poverty and inequality.
If that's what got them elected, that's what they'll go on doing, isn't it?
Well, I fear it is. And our job is already being to be more radical in many respects than they are. And people from John's wing of the party, it's not a criticism, like me, come from the view that says you've got to actually make sure the well-off pay more. And I hope we can persuade Labour, whilst they're in government, I hope eventually we'll take over from them, but I hope in the meantime we can persuade them to be more redistributive and have a fairer society, even if sometimes it hurts some people.
And if that argument fails, Norman Fowler, and Labour goes on as it is at the moment, they're more of a threat to you, aren't they? Because they're not tainted with sleaze in the way you were. They're not clapped out and exhausted in the way the Tories were at the time of the general election.
Go on.
Well, it's true, isn't it? I mean, they're full of life and bounce.
Well, no. I think that all three parties will be arguing about means, and certainly I don't for one moment, and having done the social services brief for 6 years, I don't accept for a moment the charge of Simon's that the Tories are not interested in that part. I think that the whole one nation view of Toryism, which I am a one nation Tory, is that certainly wealth creation, but from the process of wealth creation, you also provide resources for the poor, sick, and the elderly.
He just pointed out the gap had got wider under the Tories in 18 years, which is statistically true.
That's not rhetoric. That's Roundtree and all the other evidence.
Yes, but you can make that argument. But what is
you can't make it the other way, that the poor have got better off than the rich.
But certainly the poorer have the standard of living of the poorer improved, obviously, over the period. Yes, but all that means is that that is a comparison between the very richest and the very poorest. What I'm saying is, as a generality, the poorest actually, their standard of living was improved. And one of the reasons, one of the reasons why the standard of living improved was for a whole range of measures that we actually took. No, if you take something like family credit, for example, which I introduced, we introduced that for low-income families in work. Why did we introduce that? We introduced it because a lot of help was certainly going to unemployed people, but low-income families in work were not getting the same help.
But
We were targeting
how are
help
you going
in
to
that.
lay a glove on Labour if they carry on with the policies they have at the moment of constraining tax increases? If they're able to continue that throughout the Parliament, what are you going to be able to say?
Well, look, we're how many? 8 weeks after the election. We've hardly seen Labour in action yet. I mean, to go back again to the pension tax. To go back to the pension tax, again, that is a tax that the Labour Party...
Norman keeps coming up with this pension.
Yes,
he gave us the...
because I think it's a rather important one. And I think there are 6 million people out there who probably agree with
I think we've heard it 4 times. Let me just come back to you now. You were the one that told us you give us the pension paper on this great radical pension programme.
Yeah, and we gave
you were the one you wanted to switch from the state scheme to the private scheme.
Yeah.
And what happened? It cost hundreds of millions into billions of pounds of people were robbed of their pensions.
And shall I tell
Wait a minute. They
No,
were
I can
robbed of
give you
their
the answer.
pensions by people who did what you recommended,
Yeah.
went out of the state system, went into the private scheme, were robbed of their pensions,
And I'll tell you now,
have ended up now looking for compensation.
Now I'll tell you what we're hearing from the returning
You're
officer.
robbed pensions.
Hold on a second.
That's
Let's just hear what the
untrue.
returning officer is saying.
Photographers and camera
He may just be making his arrangements. We'll come back to that argument in a moment. This is David Brough, who's the acting returning officer who works for Hillingdon Council.
Our staff, if sorry to take you from your seats, but can you?
It's
clear the
just
space
after 10 to 2, and we may be in line for a result. There are 11 candidates standing here. There are 3 extreme right-wing parties: the National Front, the British National Party, and the National Democrats standing. There's the UK Independence Party, the Socialist Party, the Original Liberal Party, and Screaming Lord Sutch, as we heard earlier, is here for the official monster Raving Loony Party. And then there's the Emerald Rainbow Islands Dream Ticket Party, whatever that is. And then there are the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives and Labour. And so all those candidates are going to line up in front of that podium, which has some photographs of Uxbridge past and present pinned to it in the sports hall of Brunel University. And the turnout, Bill Bush, we were saying the turnout was 55, wasn't it? 54 and a bit, or 55 and a bit. Yes. How does that rate with by-elections? That's quite a good turnout so soon after a general election.
It's not too bad. Normally turnouts immediately after general elections are really very low. This is actually quite a middle-class area, and they are normally quite loyal voters. It's about in the middle of the expectations, even though it was terrible weather, and had it been low turnout, no doubt everyone would have said it was the weather that was at fault. And school holidays, and indeed student holidays, which is very important here.
But John Prescott was saying, you know, Labour's got this 179, 8, whatever it is now, majority. Why actually should anybody bother to vote in this by-election? It's become, I mean, it's not just political anoraks who are interested in it, is it?
No, it's not.
Crude term. I mean, it has actually been quite interesting by-election.
It's been relatively interesting, and I think it's important that people understand that a local voter goes and votes very often because of local circumstances. As far as they're concerned, it may well not change what happens at Westminster, but it could change things that happen in Uxbridge. And I think to think that people just stay at home because the national scene is settled misunderstands why a great many people do engage, at least fleetingly, with politics, which is to do with very mundane local neighbourhood issues, and perhaps because of the big national majority, they were more at the forefront in this campaign than for quite a few by-elections during the last Parliament, when national issues were always there because the Tories' governing majority was so small.
And how have the Tories been doing in local by-elections? I saw one of your researchers hard at work culling all the Thursday night local election by-elections.
Yes, well,
tell us anything?
I must admit, I find local council by-elections frequently more reliable and informative than...
and more interesting than national elections?
Than opinion polls.
Yes.
No, the Tory voters firmed up a little bit since May. Labour, if anything, has dipped slightly rather than gone up. Now, these are voters voting for their local council, might be very different issues than the things that are in their minds for parliamentary elections, but I think it's an indication that when it comes to actually going out to vote, in very low turnouts, I have to say, in local council by-elections recently, the Tories have done reasonably well. And indeed, William Hague has, in at least 2 speeches that I've heard, he's actually applauded the Tory performance in local council by-elections, 10 or a dozen wins they've actually gained from other parties they've made in recent weeks. So that's anything to go by.
Real low, though, I mean, on the councils. When you consider that, I think they had, out of 230 odd councils, they're down to about 4. If you look in the Euro elections, they're down. So in a way, I mean, over this electoral cycle, they should perhaps hope, even if they get back to normal times, they should hope to begin to improve in these areas, certainly in the councils. And the one thing that killed them, I think, in the last election, not only their divisions, but they didn't have a lot of their councillors who were normally out working out in the streets, were not there this time, and were rather angry about, I think, the party itself that had contributed to their demise in local councils.
One interesting thing, Bill was right, there were actually quite important local issues being fought here on national issues in a local context. Public transport.
Here in Uxbridge.
Yeah, the end of the tube line, investment in the tube, big issue. People's access to London. Green spaces, big issue. Very big issue. The green belt, this recreation ground in Uxley down the road, was it being sold by the council? Did they do a U-turn? That was mattered. The health service, trust in deficit, and education. I mean, those certainly we picked up. Here's the returning officer not making an announcement.
The returning officer is very... he's described as dedicated to democracy, and he spends his spare time going around schools lecturing people about the importance of voting.
It's not the old high sheriff style here.
No, no, not the high sheriff. No, it's not at all. So he's letting the photographers in to take their photographs. I just wonder whether we should, while we're waiting, because I don't know how long that will go on, since we have you here, Simon Hughes, as a Liberal Democrat, and since one of the developments has been this announcement by Tony Blair that you and Labour are going to sit together on cabinet committees to discuss things that are relevant about future voting habits and all the rest of it. Looking ahead 5 years, do you think that you'll be still at daggers drawn when an election comes, or do you think you'll be making agreements with Labour about where you'll fight and where Labour will fight?
I imagine the much more likely thing is that we'll be entirely independent and we'll put up candidates in each seat in Great Britain as Labour and the Tories will. Because it was a brave move by the government, and I applaud them on that. But it was about matters where there has been a pre-election cross-party agreement. I mean, Labour and us sat down, we talked about it, they hammered it out, there were people with different views, and it's about implementing that. And if you're going to try to implement an agreement, it's actually better that you have the people around the table. It's a consultative committee.
But may it not spread to other subjects?
Cabinet committee,
no, it's a consultative.
They're not sitting on cabinet.
Consultative committee.
Yeah, yeah, and that's in line with the constitutional agreement that we had before the election that said on matters of constitution, devolution, some regions, we would discuss them together for business on the floor.
And I mean, let's be courteous.
We're going to get the results, so let's go over for that.
The candidates are lined up in alphabetical order. I, David John Brough, being the acting returning officer at the election of a Member of Parliament for the Uxbridge constituency held on the 31st of July 1997, give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the election is as follows. Ian Middleton Anderson, National Democrat, 157. Ronnie Carroll, Emerald Rainbow Islands Dream Ticket Party, 30. James Rosewell Feisenberger, UK Independence Party, 39. Kenneth Keith Carl Kerr, Liberal Democrat, 1,792. Julia Leonard, Socialist Party, 259. John Macaulay, National Front, 110. Henry Middleton, Original Liberal Party, 69. Alexander John Randall, Conservative, 16,288. Andrew Francis Slaughter, Labour, 12,522. That was 12,522. Lord David Such, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, 396. Francis Taylor, British National Party, 205. And I declare that Alexander John Randall is duly elected Member of Parliament for the Uxbridge constituency.
So John Randall takes Uxbridge for the Conservatives and his majority up from 700 for the last Conservative, the last election, to something close to 4,000. Let's just see the result. Here it is that John Randall got. Let's just see the figures.
To the meeting.
Conservatives 16,288, Labour in second place with 12,522, Liberal Democrats 1,792, which looks very much to me like a lost deposit, a majority of 3,766 for the Conservatives. So in a moment the Conservative victor will be speaking, John Randall. There he is. Let's hear what he has to say down there on the platform.
For conducting today's proceedings in such an efficient manner. I'd also like to thank the police once again for doing such an excellent service and providing safety for candidates and all those people voting. I'd like to say a big thank you to all my supporters, for all the members of the Uxbridge Association who've worked together so terrifically, and all those other people who've come in and to help. Following on in the footsteps of such an excellent and well-loved Member of Parliament is going to be a very difficult task. The people of Uxbridge have selected me. It's a great honour, and I aim, as I have said throughout, to serve all of them, regardless of their political affinities, their race, their creed. This has also been the beginning and an excellent start for our new leader, William Hague. We have learnt the lesson of May the 1st. We have listened to the people of Uxbridge. The Conservative Party now is no longer lecturing. We are listening. I think this is an excellent start. I think from now on, the people of this country will begin again to realise that they can trust the Conservatives. Thank you very much.
There's one for the Conservatives, the seat, shaking hands with the Liberal Democrat there, and now the defeated Labour candidate, Andrew Slaughter, brought in by Labour, imposed on the
May I
constituency.
also begin by thanking you, Mr. Acting Returning Officer, for all the work that you and your staff have done today, and also thanking the police for the efficiency and professionalism which they've carried out security operation tonight and throughout the day. I'd like to thank John Randall and the other candidates for the clean campaign that's been fought, and I'd like to congratulate John Randall on winning tonight, and I know that he will be a very good constituency MP for Uxbridge, as the late Sir Michael Shrewsbury was before him. I'd particularly like to thank the local party members and the hundreds of supporters from around the country who've come here today and throughout the campaign to support New Labour. Thank you very much. This is a by-election which it would have been a miracle for us to have won. This is one of the safest Conservative seats in the country, and we've seen tonight, with the collapse of the Liberal vote, the absence of a referendum candidate and abstentionists going back to the Conservative Party, how that victory is founded. I'm pleased to see the Labour vote has held up from the landslide which we achieved on May the 1st, and I'm very proud of the campaign which we fought in Uxbridge, and in particular the visit of the Prime Minister, which showed that New Labour can get a wonderful reception even in the Tory heartlands, and the New Labour message can be spread throughout the country. In 100 short days, we have already begun to deliver for all the people of Britain. I'm proud that I made a small contribution during this campaign by helping to secure £100,000 for Hillingdon Hospital. I'm proud of the campaign we've fought. I'm proud of New Labour. I look forward to the many, many achievements of the new government over the next 5 years and beyond, as we continue to build a better Britain for all our people. Thank you very much.
Andrew Slaughter then, the Labour candidate. And now in third place. I said he lost his deposit. He didn't actually lose his deposit. The Liberal Democrats just saved their deposit.
Extend my
and this is
congratulations
Kenneth
to you
Kerr.
and your team and the usual courtesies that's offered. I think this has been a clean by-election by by-election standards. And I'd like to say that tonight should not be a night for recrimination, but it should be a night for the Liberal Democrats to feel that they have made an excellent account of themselves. We have fought this by-election on the issues that matter to the people of Uxbridge, which is about education, health, and the environment. We are quite clear that we've built a tremendous base and look forward to 1998 when we can build on that base to make sure that we have more councils in the borough of Hillingdon. I'd just like to thank a number of people on my campaign team who have done so much to contribute to this success. But firstly, I'd like to thank John Randall and congratulate you once again on winning. I think you fought an excellent campaign. And I would also like to thank Andy and his team, who are worthy candidates. We have started here after our May election, when we have the best results we've ever had since 1906. I can say that we have won the argument, we have won the minds of the people of Uxbridge. The only thing that we didn't achieve tonight was to win their votes. And what I'd like to leave you with is that we have left an indelible Liberal Democrat mark on this constituency. And I hope to be returning here in 1998 to ensure that we continue to grow. Thank you very much indeed.
Keith Kerr, the Liberal Democrat. Now let's see the results just once more of this by-election.
Thank you very much.
I think goes to the platform. The Conservatives, 16,288. John Randall, a Conservative victor, a majority of 3,766. And Labour, 12,522. Andrew Slaughter. And the Liberal Democrats, 1,792. For the Liberal Democrats, Keith Kerr. And this is the share of the vote. Majority of 3,766. The Tories' share 51.1%. That's up 7.6% from what they got in May 97. A swing from Labour to the Conservatives of 5%. So that's the result. And Bill Bush, perhaps you'd like to comment on this first. This is quite a good result, rather better than expected for the Conservatives, isn't it?
It is. It's clearly better than anything the national opinion polls have suggested over the last few weeks. If anything, it's better than the local council by-elections I was muttering about earlier. It's a very good performance. I'm sure that there'll be some head-scratching in Labour circles. They will probably think that the fuss over the candidate did them no favours at all. And I think the Tories will feel relatively happy that on a reasonable turnout, 55%, they've got a majority, a share of the vote up over 50%. They're at 51.2%, and even the Liberal Democrats can't argue when the winning candidate gets over half of the vote.
Not that it'll make a jot of difference to what Labour does or to what happens in the autumn when Parliament comes back.
In terms of real politics, it makes not a blind bit of difference. I think in terms of morale, and ultimately morale can affect real politics, it's a good start for the by-election season. The Tories will be hoping for a lot more of these in the next few years.
What about the Liberal Democrats' position, Simon Hughes, on that? Just avoiding losing your deposit, but he said rather touchingly, we won the argument, but we didn't win the votes, which is a curious political position to take up.
I think I said at the beginning of the programme, we went in knowing that we were caught between the squeeze of two people fighting very closely. We knew that was the score. We held our deposit. In past by-elections, the third party hasn't always done that. It was for us a respectable result. I think it was a very good Tory result. No dissenting for that. And I have to say that I think it does prove that having a local candidate who knows the score is very important. Parachuting people in is very dangerous. Parachuting somebody in to replace somebody who is local is even more dangerous. And I think although Bill said that it may not affect the sense of politics hugely, I think it will cause Labour just to think about a few things. It'll certainly encourage the Tories. We're encouraged, we're very happy with that, we've held our own, but I think Labour will be checked, and the Labour machine will not be allowed just to drive straight on, because it doesn't always work.
John Prescott, is that a lesson that you think Labour will draw from this?
I think the lesson we learn is that it's a Tory seat, and a landslide victory for us. We weren't able to get that, as I was saying before. I think our proportion of the vote is the same as it was in that election, about 40-odd%, I think. It's higher than it was in 1992, and of course we always have lessons to learn from every by-election. I've been involved in quite a lot of them, but there was obviously a lot of switching around from the Liberals and the referendum vote, and it went to the Tory party, and they've been able now to sustain a seat that was traditionally theirs and given more of a majority for it. But Labour has done well in that, in basically a constituency which is still solidly a Tory seat.
Norman Fowler, are you surprised by the majority you got?
Well, I'm very pleased. I think it's an extremely good result for the Conservative Party. The opinion polls were against us. Only this morning you saw the opinion polls against us. At the beginning of this campaign, Labour obviously thought that they would win it. Tony Blair came into the campaign himself. I think it was a vindication of our campaign tactics. It was a great victory for John Randall, and it was also a great victory for William Hague as well in this by-election. So I think you've seen the beginning of our recovery. That is the political significance of this by-election. And I think that you've also seen the ending, the stopping of the Labour bandwagon. So I think that in many ways this is a very important by-election result.
Why do you call it a great victory for William Hague, since he was described as having been here just briefly, and we've been told over and over again that it was the local candidate John Randall who actually won the seat? Nothing to do with William Hague.
Because William was, you described William's visit as low-key. It wasn't. It was not that, in fact, but it was William's strategy. And I think that what really needs to be understood is that there is a new spirit inside the Tory party. John Prescott has had great fun over the months talking about the divisions in the Tory party. The divisions in the Tory party have come to an end, and when the Tory party fights as a united force, as we fought here with an extremely good candidate like John Randall, we win and we'll go on winning. And that's why I say that this is the end of the bandwagon as far as Labour is concerned.
Well, we've been joined by John Randall, the victor for the Conservatives, and by Andrew Slaughter, who was defeated for Labour. Andrew Slaughter, can I come to you first? Do you think it was a mistake for you to be parachuted in here, albeit from Hammersmith, which is no more than a traffic jam away from Uxbridge?
I don't think in the end that was a significant issue in the result we've seen tonight. What we've seen tonight, as John Prescott was saying a moment ago, is a Labour vote which is basically stable from May the 1st, the greatest Labour landslide ever. It's a remarkable achievement for the Labour Party. The majority is accounted for in other ways by Conservative votes which had been hidden on May the 1st and which had floated back to the Conservative Party.
Did you pick up, as you went round, a resentment that your predecessor, who'd done reasonably well at the general election, got closer than you did in terms of majority to taking the seat, had been dropped by the Labour Party?
Not noticeably. The issues that people wanted to talk about on the doorstep were primarily national issues which had a local bent, such as health and education and the environment. Overwhelmingly, people were concerned with the quality of their own lives, and people were saying overwhelmingly that they were pleased that a new Labour government had been elected, even people who hadn't voted for it, and were pleased with what that government was doing.
So is it the bandwagon stopped, as Norman Fowler says, by your defeat?
Well, as I say, we did as well as we did in May, and therefore that comment must be nonsense.
But no, it's not nonsense, because the expectation was you were doing better. The opinion polls show that you're up at 57%, as opposed to 44 in the general election. So it appeared that there was still a tide running nationally. Yes,
that's an important difference.
National opinion polls. There are going to be. Until such time as we have a Canadian wipeout, there are going to be strong Conservative areas of the country. Uxbridge happens to be one of those areas.
Right. John Randall, congratulations on taking this seat for the Conservatives. We've heard a lot of talk about you being the local man and people shopping at your shop. I don't know whether they do or they don't do that. But do you think it's that actually won it for you? Or is it the brilliance of William Hague as the new Tory leader and an end to the Tory party as incompetent, sleaze-ridden, divided over Europe and all that William Hague has suddenly, by magic, sort of waved a wand and allowed you through?
Well, I think the defeat on May the 1st made us sit and think about where we wanted to go. And we're a humble party.
Now?
We're a humble party now. We had to be after that massive defeat. We very much wanted to listen. We listened to the people of Uxbridge. We don't want to lecture. We're not in a triumphant mood tonight. But certainly the opportunities with the new leader, with William Hague, who very much is the inspiration for this listening idea, has marked here in Uxbridge, I think, a comeback that we achieved here 25 years ago when Sir Michael Shersby was elected in the by-election.
You mustn't exaggerate. It's not that much of a comeback. I mean, it's always been a Tory seat for donkey's years, and you nearly lost it in
I can
May.
remember. I'm quite a young man. I can remember a Labour member of Parliament. There's a lot of talk about it being a safe Tory seat. So Michael Shersby made it into a reasonably safe Tory seat. There's no doubt of that. But it is not a natural Tory seat, and I shall be working hard to try and reassert that. But it is certainly, it is far from being what you might call one of the safe Tory seats. As I said, I can remember a Labour MP in within my span here in Uxbridge, and I know after the war, for I think it was 8 years more, we had Frank Beswick, who was actually an excellent constituency MP, but he sadly was a Labour MP.
Were you surprised by the result?
I'm always a very cautious man, Mr. Dimbleby, so I was quietly confident, but until these things are counted, I was the agent for Sir Michael Shersby at the general election, and I know that you can never really assess what's going on. When you ask people questions on the doorsteps, I think everybody around here would agree, you don't always get the truthful answer. We seem to have done, this is what we were expecting, but sometimes the answers aren't the same. On May the 1st, people told us one thing and did another, so we never take anything for granted.
John Prescott, let's go back to the national scene. Parliament's not sitting now until come September, early October. When it comes back, is anybody going to remember what happened here in Uxbridge? Does it have a message for Labour?
Well, it's certainly a different message for Labour than it is for the Tory. We just see it as a very safe Tory seat. I mean, 12.5% swing gave us something like, what, 40-odd% of the vote. It's a reduced vote this time. We've kept the same proportion on that vote. I don't think it will be an event. Tories needed this desperately. If they hadn't won this seat, for God's sake, well, an awful lot of people have been saying they've not turned the corner. I think Norman was honest enough to admit that. It was desperate for them. But as far as are concerned, it was a safe Tory seat. They've now held on to it. We've kept our proportion of the vote, and it's fought a good campaign. We'll get on now with convincing the electorate in this country they were right to vote for us, and that's what we'll be doing.
And you say if they hadn't won this, people would say they haven't turned the corner. So you think you think they have turned the corner?
I think, well, they'd have been in desperate trouble if they hadn't have won it, and I can imagine them now saying, well, look, this has turned it round. They've discovered they're a listening party. I thought that was something we talked about a couple of years ago. But anyway, you must listen to the electorate, whatever that argument is. And the result for them, they desperately needed. For us, it's just one more mark along the way. We notice what they say about us nationally. We'll go on with the honeymoon period that Norman's talking about, delivering the promises that we promised at the general election.
But have they turned the corner?
I don't think so. No, by far they haven't turned the corner. And even if they do, they've got to get turning an awful lot more to get rid of a majority of something like 179.
Okay. Norman Fowler, what's going to happen to the Tory party morale as a result of this?
By the way, this doesn't reduce the majority at all, this election.
No.
No. It's a Tory seat.
Well, the morale, I mean, obviously we regard it as a good result. John Randall is entirely right that we're not going to be overconfident now about it. There's a lot of work for us to do, but this result has obviously come exactly at the right moment, exactly at the right time. And I think you'll find that over this next 2 or 3 months, you'll find shadow ministers going round the country, re-establishing some of the bridges that need repairing. John Prescott referred to local government. I accept some of that criticism. So we will be rebuilding. This is the beginning of the rebuilding. This is the beginning of the recovery. That, I think, is the significance of it.
Of course, it's a surprise. It's a surprise for you because you held it early, thinking you were going to lose it, didn't you? You might as well get it behind you before the autumn conferences and all the rest.
Well, no, that actually was part of the strategy that you were rather questioning before. William Hague's strategy was to go at this particular time, to go with John Randall, an excellent candidate, a candidate who is known here, a local candidate.
He's won now, you don't need to say this.
No, but he is a good candidate, because I went round canvassing with him. and one realises and understands how he is viewed here, and that is of tremendous importance. And the strategy, the overall strategy of the party was absolutely correct, and John Randall put it into effect.
Good. Well, I think on that note, at 2:20 we can call the proceedings to a halt. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for joining us. Just a reminder that this by-election in Uxbridge, the first of this Parliament, was won by the Conservatives, a majority of just under 4,000. Certainly a fillip for the Conservatives, though it's unlikely to make a jot of difference to what goes on in Parliament when it reassembles in the autumn. From all of us here in Uxbridge and from Carolyn Quinn down on the floor, good night.